Like many programmers, I find the idea of artificial intelligence incredibly appealing. I don't really know if it's something that can be put into words easily, but it feels almost parental to program something and watch it learn and make decisions all by itself. It's a rush and it's immensely satisfying. Artificial intelligence and its brother in arms automation are cornerstones of the image of utopia. Both whisper promises of something desired by people since the beginning of modernity: freedom from toil. Every printing press and vacuum cleaner promises this freedom. Every calculator, escalator, radiator, generator, and refrigerator are in a boat crossing the Delaware, aiming to help simplify seconds off the unending slog. They are convenient, they are easy to use, and they free people up to do better things with their time. There is little doubt that technologies have the potential to make the world a better place, but it is very important to pay attention to them as they begin to worm their way into society's niches. It might sometimes get dismissed as science fiction or Luddism, but there are serious drawbacks to certain use cases of AI and automation that are important to address. These issues span ethical, economic, and political spheres, and often crop up in more than one at a time. They ideally should be examined now, when their impact is present but not ubiquitous. Without proper legislation, technologies under the banner of AI and automation have the potential to warp our society in frightening ways that people should be wary of. I would like to take a look at some of them today briefly, to better prepare you for what might be headed our way in the coming decades. The most commonly discussed negative impact of automation might also be where it sees the most application: the workforce. Worrying about the loss of jobs to automation in capitalist societies is definitely a legitimate fear. 20 million manufacturing jobs are projected to disappear across the world within the next decade, according to a report by Oxford Economics. From a different report by McKinsey, 1/3 of Americans could lose their jobs to various forms of automation by this time. These jobs will be disappearing at a significantly higher rate in low-income areas as well. Elimination of blue-collar jobs will only exacerbate issues in widening income inequality that exist in countries such as the United States, since automated workers can often do jobs more reliably and more cost-effectively than their human counterparts. White-collar jobs will disappear too, of course, and there's a joke among software developers that says we'll eventually automate ourselves out of a job, but the reality is that many office jobs can be done through scripting. These jobs will be gone, and they are notable, but so are positions held by legions of manufacturing workers and fast food employees. The revelation of this upcoming tide of unemployment is harrowing, but it does not come without possible solutions. A recent vocal prognosticator for the need of a universal basic income to counteract these effects was Democratic primary candidate Andrew Yang, who dropped out of the race in early February of 2020. Yang's flagship proposal, nicknamed the Freedom Dividend, aimed to provide $1,000 to each American monthly. Though I was not a Yang supporter while he was in the race, I do think policies similar to Yang's Freedom Dividend will end up being proposed by Congress as the consequences of automation and AI begin to further heighten income inequality throughout the American people. In fact, even as this video essay is being drafted while I hide in my apartment from the pandemic, discussion of UBI has become a popular topic recently. As of late March, even Donald Trump seems open to offering relief to individuals from the negative economic impact caused by the pandemic. Whether this discussion will actually result in a payout remains to be seen, but it is hard to tell if a check like this will end up leading to a UBI system that extends into the future. Automation in the workforce is an important issue, but it is by no means the only one. Taking a step in a different direction, I'd like to talk about a technology that you might use every day: facial recognition. Facial recognition has really taken off in recent years. It's used to secure cell phones, identify photos on social media, and position that dog filter nose just right. However, facial recognition has another very obvious use case: security, and monitoring. This kind of stuff can be really touchy. Individual privacy seems less and less feasible as technology advances, but security combined with facial recognition could make the concept of privacy a thing of the past. China, a country whose government is already known for a number of cruel and authoritarian practices, has become a world leader in the use of security cameras to monitor its citizens. China has a record high of closed-circuit television cameras per citizen, over 1 camera for every 10 people. Most of these cameras are concentrated in urban areas. A particularly chilling development in this reality is the fact that as of early December 2019, people using mobile phones in China are required to submit a facial scan in order to confirm their identity when registering a SIM card. This comes on top of the launch of a security network utilizing facial recognition in Beijing subways. This comes on top of the developing social credit system, in which citizens are ranked for exhibiting legal behaviors the government deems bad, and people on the bottom of the ladder can be punished for it. This comes on top of monitoring the actions of people residing in the Xinjiang region through the use of security mobile apps. Many of these people are Uyghurs, a persecuted ethnic minority of Muslims. As many as 1 million Uyghurs are currently being held in what the Chinese government calls re-education centers. Facial recognition and artificial intelligence are crucial in pulling out dissenters and unsatisfactory citizens from the vast amount of data being collected by all of these systems. In order to avoid security akin to that of 1984, there has been discussion of limiting how facial recognition technology can be used in the United States. Microsoft, a leading company in the development and use of facial recognition, released 2 blog posts in 2018 imploring politicians to create legislation to restrict the technology, which I will link in the description. Brad Smith, president and chief legal advisor of Microsoft, makes a few suggestions in the second post of what these laws should look like. Smith's proposal seeks to limit the use of facial recognition for 3 different reasons: in order to protect people from bias and discrimination, in order to protect the privacy of an individual, and in order to protect democratic freedoms and human rights. With each objective, he gives a rough outline of what should be required of companies to safeguard these freedoms. He suggests governments should try to prevent bias by requiring transparency from the company, testing software bias from third parties, having humans review any high-stakes decisions made by the AI, and complying with current discrimination laws. In order to protect the privacy of individuals, Smith requests that consent should be required and notice should be prevalent when an individual enters an area being monitored with facial recognition. Finally, Smith proposes that in order to protect democratic freedoms, ongoing surveillance of specific people with facial recognition should be limited, and should require a court-ordered permit or a state of emergency to use in the first place. While I initially had some skepticism at the thought of allowing companies the opportunity to, shape the laws they'll be bound by, I do think that Smith's proposal gives a good rough draft of some of what people should be thinking about when drafting legislation to limit the use of this technology. It will be everywhere before we know it. I think that action needs to be taken quickly now while it's easier to limit. The next thing I want to discuss is a bit of a unique moral quandary you get when you create machines that make decisions of their own accord. If you could ask her, a person you might want to discuss this advent of technology with might be Elaine Herzberg. If you don't know her name already, Herzberg will go down in history as the first pedestrian victim of driverless cars. She was the first, but I think it's pretty clear that she will not be the last. Elaine Herzberg was killed about 2 years before I'm writing the script for this video, on March 18, 2018. She was hit by a self-driving car being developed by Uber while wheeling her bicycle across the street in Tempe, Arizona. It was a little before 10 p.m. The program guiding the car that struck and killed her predicted her path across the road incorrectly, and didn't react until over a second before impact, too late to do anything. The human in the driver's seat of the car was streaming Hulu and tried to swerve out of the way, but it was less than a second before the car hit Herzberg. The aftermath of the crash involved an outside settlement between Uber and Herzberg's family, and the governor of Arizona revoking Uber's ability to test self-driving cars in Arizona. Uber ceased testing on public roads for about 9 months, only to return to testing in Pittsburgh on December 20th, 2018, with the intent to also test in San Francisco and Toronto in the next couple of years. Now that you know some of the details, the question that I think needs to be asked is, in cases like the death of Elaine Herzberg, who is responsible? An autonomous vehicle killed a pedestrian, but an autonomous vehicle isn't something you can weigh with the responsibility of a person's death. I think there are a few easy scapegoats you can paint, and I think we should examine them. The first thing you could say is that Elaine Herzberg herself is responsible for her death. There actually is a bit of merit to this. According to Arizona law, since Herzberg was crossing the street outside of a crosswalk, the car had the right of way. Because of this law, the software implementation wasn't trying to classify Herzberg as a pedestrian obstacle until it was too late, of course. However, there is also a point to be made that autonomous vehicles should seek to save lives whenever able, and the car's sensors picked her up well before the crash occurred. Herzberg was homeless, and crossing the street late at night without a crosswalk is a behavior that probably isn't that uncommon among people like her. Another person you could blame for it is Rafaela Vasquez, whose job it was to monitor the car to prevent collision. As I mentioned earlier, Vasquez was watching The Voice before the time of the impact, making it very easy to claim that she was the reason the crash occurred. However, the evidence with regards to whether or not the crash was avoidable conflicts. Records from the car show that Herzberg was detectable 6 seconds before impact, but self-driving cars use sensors outside of the visual spectrum, and the official police report on the collision stated that Herzberg came out of the shadows onto the road, making her difficult to see. The report also noted that Vasquez could have been braking at least 57 hundredths of a second before she did, which could potentially have given Herzberg enough time to cross without being hit. This gives some credibility to the idea that Vasquez's negligence resulted in Herzberg's death, but it's not really exactly ironclad. I think serving the full blame of the accident to either of these people is a bit of an oversight regardless. The purpose of the test was to determine the effectiveness of Uber's software to deal with situations like this, and it was the company's decision to greenlight that software for tests on open roads. Uber is the company that created the software that killed someone in this crash, and I think their attempt to capitalize on an upcoming market is also partially responsible for Herzberg's death. After doing the research, I can't really give you a clean answer on who should take responsibility for these sorts of issues. There are definitely people at fault, but saying any individual is the reason that this tragedy occurred ignores other key details of the situation. Risks like this do call into question the need for self-driving cars in the first place, but another unfortunate reality is that the leading cause of car accidents is human error, sitting at around 90% of all accidents. Accidents account for around 38,000 deaths a year in the United States, making driving one of the most dangerous activities that people engage in daily. Self-driving cars have the potential to save a lot of lives if they lower deaths by human error even a fraction, which complicates matters further. With so much at stake, shouldn't we be doing all we can to ensure they get on the roads faster? Safe autonomous vehicles will save many people once they hit roadways, but there is a cost to their development that cannot be ignored. They will likely cause deaths, many deaths, into the future as problems with them crop up. There will be many Elaine Herzbergs before all is said and done, and it is something we must keep in mind when weighing the inclusion of these technologies into our society going further. I initially wanted to end the video here, but I can't in good faith conclude a discussion about problems with artificial intelligence in our society without a discussion of lethal autonomous weapons. Lethal autonomous weapons, called LAWs for short, refer to any armed system that can make decisions on its own. By this definition, a mousetrap isn't an autonomous weapon, but the Terminator obviously would be. Like other technologies I've talked about in this video, LAWs aren't science fiction. Israel and South Korea already use autonomous sentry guns to safeguard their borders. As of the recording of this video, there is currently no worldwide ban on these technologies. A motion was proposed by the United Nations in March of 2019 with almost unanimous support, save representatives of Australia, the United Kingdom, Israel, Russia, and the United States. Many of these countries have unveiled programs that are developing LAWs, which shouldn't really come as a surprise to anyone. Landmines are comparable to LAWs in that they are fully autonomous systems that are geared towards killing people for use in wartime, and are currently prohibited under the Mine Ban Convention, which has been adopted by more than 150 countries since its inception by the United Nations in 1997. There are numerous pushes for LAWs to be outlawed, including one by many members and representatives of the Catholic Church. Another notable push is from the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots, with support from over 1,000 experts in artificial intelligence and many notable scientists and business leaders. These campaigns cite a few different reasons to ban these weapons, including fear of inciting another arms race, the difficulty of controlling a war democratically if autonomous soldiers only answer to one individual, and the fear of creating detachment of human judgment and agency with respect to war. People championing LAWs claim that they will save lives of soldiers by preventing the risk of human life in conflict. It has been shown with many weapons developed during the 20th century that the allowed existence of weapons will result in untrustworthy and irresponsible governments and individuals gaining access to them, and in doing so puts many innocent people at risk. And that's it. This video is definitely a bit of a downer to research and put together, in all honesty. The future is now, and there are definitely many scary aspects of allowing computer programs and robots to make decisions for us. There are a lot of good reasons to do so, but as a society, we must remain vigilant towards how these technologies will alter what it is like to live as a person on Earth. Willfully ignoring the downsides to automation and artificial intelligence will have severe consequences. And the best things you can do is educate yourself on these issues and become active politically. Pressure needs to be put on governments and corporations to ensure that the use of technology doesn't end up turning our world into a worse place to live. I am a fan of AI, and I want nothing more than to see it used ethically. Thank you for watching my video. This is my second video essay. Feel free to catch the previous one where I discuss the basics of the philosophy of antinatalism, and subscribe if you're interested in more essays like this one. Farewell!